What are some solved mysteries?
The McStay family disappearance and murders. In February of 2010, the McStays, a family of four, Mum Summer, Dad Joseph, and sons Gianni and Joseph Jr., seemingly vanished from their home abruptly. A carton of eggs was left open on the counter and the family dogs were still outside in the backyard. The scene was eerie, and complicated because the home the McStays lived in was in the process of being renovated, so a neat and orderly home wasn't the norm at this stage. It appeared there was missing furniture and the usual mess that comes with construction, some freshly painted or redone surfaces mixed with older versions. From the outside it appeared the family just took off. Neighbor had surveillance that captured what appeared to be the bottom of the family SUV leaving the driveway. Since they were living in California, the border to Mexico wasn't far and authorities found footage of what appeared to be the McStays walking into Mexico with their two little boys in tow. The family SUV was found abandoned in a mall parking lot near the Mexico border. 3 years passed before the bodies of the McStays were found buried in shallow graves in the California desert. The bodies appeared to be in advanced decomposition and there were signs of blunt force trauma. A sledgehammer was also found buried with one of the bodies. Chase Merritt, a business partner to Joseph McStay, was arrested and charged with their murders on the 11th of May 2014. His trial was delayed for years until 2019. He was sentenced to death. Motive: Chase had a gambling addiction and had been and continued embezzling money from the business. His DNA was found in the McStays' abandoned vehicle. He bludgeoned this beautiful family to death for money. ETA link with more info, link.
The disappearance of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, author of The Little Prince, who was also a French reconnaissance pilot during World War II. In 1944, he took off on a reconnaissance mission from Corsica and never made it back, and there was never any evidence of what might have happened to him and his plane. Finally, in 1998, a French fisherman pulled up his net and found wrapped in it a silver bracelet engraved with Saint-Exupéry's name, and in 2004, a diver searched in the area and found the remains of his plane, which had apparently been shot down by a German fighter after all.
The Windsor hum, link. Residents of Windsor, Canada, have been saying they could hear a hum coming from across the river in Detroit for the better part of a few decades. Well, turns out that when a steel producer turned their furnaces off recently, when they were closing up shop, the hum stopped. People had no idea what the noise could be until the factory closed. Edit. Also a little fun fact, Zug Island, where the factory was located, was mentioned in RoboCop and was also the destination of the SS Edmund Fitzgerald before it sank.
Devil's Kettle Falls. A stream separates into two sections. One continues normally, the other spirals deep into a hole. All sorts of things were thrown down the hole in an effort to discover where the water went. Ping pong balls, various dies, it was even rumored that someone stuck an old car down there. Eventually someone came up with a clever idea. They measured the total water flow above and below the falls and discovered they were similar enough to deduce the two streams joined back up relatively quickly. Edit, source. Link. Also, I guess fun bonus, I first learned of the mystery from Reddit and it has since been solved.
Wouldn't the dyes have shown that pretty quickly then? The Siberian craters. As the permafrost melts, the methane gas gets released and it sometimes ignites.
Just went down the rabbit hole and it looks like there are different types of Siberian craters. Batagayka is just a slumping hillside after permafrost melted. Potomsky seems to be gas-related but without an explosion. But many others, as you mentioned, from gas explosions. Interestingly, these are huge. I expected a car-size explosion, but they are hundreds of feet deep. One thing I can't find is the ignition source. What lights the gas? Edit, some people are asking for pictures. This article has plenty. Link.
Forrest Fenn's hidden treasure chest that he buried years ago and left clues to where to find its location. It was found within the last 2 years, I think. Here's a link to an article better explaining it. Link.
I can't believe we still don't get to know where it was.
The missing feet murders, link. For many years, human feet kept washing up on the shores near Seattle and Vancouver. A total of 21 were found. Naturally, people thought there was a murderer afoot. Sorry. And their modus operandi was to cut their victims' feet off before disposing of the body in the ocean. Turns out many of the remains were deemed as suicides. Turns are when you jump off one of the many bridges Seattle and Vancouver has to offer, your body decomposes, and your limbs detach. The foam and floaty material in the victims' shoes ensured their feet would float and get caught in tidal currents, this dispersing the detached feet nicely. Case closed.
Wasn't it also discovered, based on the type of shoe, that some of the feet had potentially been attached to victims of the 2004 South Asian tsunami? I remember reading that one pair of Nikes was only produced for the South Asian market, and therefore it was surmised that some of the feet originated across the Pacific.
The Erebus and the Terror were found a few years ago. The two ships were part of an Arctic expedition and disappeared 150 years ago. Link.
They had a whole section of the Museum of History in Ottawa for it a few years ago, with some of the remnants of the ship. It was very interesting. One thing that struck me was for years, the local indigenous population talked about those crazy white guys trying, and failing, to sail through the Northwest Passage, and ended up resorting to cannibalism in an attempt to survive. Their stories were ignored for decades, but what do you know, the oral histories ended up being an important part of fitting the wreckage, and they found cut marks and evidence of cannibalism on some of the bodies found on King William Island.
The case of Adrienne Shelley, screenwriter for Waitress. Husband came home to find her hanging in the shower, ruled suicide. He insists she was happy and would never kill herself, promoting another view of crime scene where they found a shoe print that matched a construction worker in the building. Sure enough, the construction worker went to rob her and thought he killed her, so staged a suicide when the hanging ended up being the actual thing that killed her. Link.
That was his original testimony. He straight up killed her intentionally.
The Sailing Stones of Death Valley. Link. Video here. Link. TLDR. Rocks would magically move up to 1,500 feet in the desert. Turns out it gets cold and freezes the ground overnight, and the rocks would get pushed by the ice sheets that melted under the wind.
Aren't we all just air hockey pucks in the wind, my friend?
The Bloop. Link. TLDR. In 1997 a really weird and loud noise was detected underwater and everyone was all WTF was that? In 2012 it was determined it was an iceberg breaking and or rubbing against the seabed.
Now if only we could find an explanation for the wow signal. Link.
1947 and British South American Airways aircraft named Stardust disappeared. Its last message was simply STENDEC. After an exhausting search, no trace of the aircraft was found. For years conspiracy theories and talk of alien abduction by wackos circulated. Till 1998, when mountain climbers on a remote mountain found an engine, pieces of metal, and clothing at the bottom of a glacier on the side of Mount Tupungato. Turns out the aircraft got caught flying the wrong way in the jet stream while it was flying at night and using a system of timing when to start their descent. Being in the jet stream reduced their airspeed in relation to the Earth and they smacked themselves straight into the side of a mountain, after which an avalanche covered the wreckage. The wreckage took decades to flow down the side of the mount with the glaciers. The glacier preserved the wreck so well that 50 years later the recovery team found identifiable remains, personal items, and could read serial numbers on the engines. Amazing one of the landing gear tires was still inflated, and that teams continued to visit the site for periodically as more of the aircraft, cargo, and remains of passengers are still emerging from the ice.
But what is STENDEC?
While it doesn't give us who the Zodiac Killer is, just recently his most infamous 340 cipher was solved after 51 years.
According to Oranchak and team, the message reads, I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me, that wasn't me on the TV show, which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise, so they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise. Death. Article about who did it and how. Link.
The death of Azaria Chamberlain. Link. She was a 2-month-old girl who disappeared while camping with her parents near Uluru. Prosecutors successfully tried her mother for murder and father as an accessory. During the entire ordeal it was insisted by her mother that Azaria was taken by dingoes, native wild dogs in Australia. This was disregarded, as before this there were no records of dingoes showing any hostility towards humans or causing any attacks or fatalities nearby. Several years later, an unrelated search not far from the campground found a child's coat, of the exact brand and description Azaria's mother gave to the police, in an area littered with dingo dens. The parents' conviction was overturned and the case was established that in reality, she had been taken from her parents' tent during the night, killed and eaten by dingoes.
Sadly, this was only ever a mystery to anyone who didn't pay attention to the local Aboriginals, who were pretty clear that dingoes will and have carried off babies.
Benjamin Kyle. Man found beaten behind a Burger King with severe amnesia. It was a fascinating mystery until it was solved, then it was kind of sad. He had made TV appearances, had a couple of AMAs on Reddit, but no one could identify him. When his identity was discovered, William Burgess Powell, there was still a 20-year gap in his life from 1984 to 2004. There's no record he had done anything. He had distanced himself from his family and had no friends, which is why no one recognized or identified him from his TV appearances.
I remember some of his AMAs. So fascinating. How was his identity discovered?
Genetic testing. 23andMe type stuff matched him to other people and they figured it out.
Mark Felt was Deep Throat, link.
Met him once in the 80s, he was a connection through a business associate of my father's. When it came out that Mr. Felt was DT, my dad called to remind me of the dinner we had when I was a kid. I don't remember much other than the intimidating vibe. The type of guy who, even as an approximately 8 years old, I didn't need to be told to mind my manners. I just did because he was scary. And his wife wore a hat with a fake bird in it.
What Dinosaurus looked like. When I was a kid in the 80s, all that was known were the bones of the arms with enormous claws. Hence its name, Terrible Hand. They were mostly shown grasping a small car because they were so freaking huge. The rest of the animal was a complete mystery. Was it like a giant Allosaurus, one that'd make the T-Rex look like a puppy in comparison? A few years later it seemed more likely to be ostrich-like and an omnivore. Either way, given how rare it is for fossils to form at all, I was convinced I'd die never knowing what this dinosaur actually looked like. Then surprisingly in 2014, they found more bones and it was just the weirdest thing. Link.
Only in 2014, I had a book in my childhood where it speculates that Deinonychus was a therizinosaur. It had similarly massive claws after all.
Smiley face. I had books in my childhood from a time when Therizinosaurus was also nothing more than a couple of mystery claws. To show the scale compared to a human, they drew the rest of the theory as the silhouette of a Tyrannosaurus, but with the long scythe claws. Well.
The Solway Spaceman, link. In 1964, Jim Templeton, a fireman from the English city of Carlisle, was spending an afternoon out with his family when he snapped a photograph his young daughter without much thought. But when he got home and had the film developed, he noticed what has now become known as the Solway Spaceman. The photo shows what many people say is a person in some form of spacesuit. Kodak even analyzed the photo and their experts said it was authentic, lending to the spaceman theory. The spaceman was his wife with her back to the camera. He was only able to see 70% of the frame and didn't realize his wife was in the background of the picture.
And it took nearly how long? For his wife to realize, oh yeah, I was behind.
So, in the early 2000s, someone posted new wave music that had been initially recorded off a German radio station on cassette around 1985. It contained about a minute of a song that became known as Stay, the second time around, that no one seemed to be able to find any more information about. This became a pretty famous, earworm, internet mystery, until 2013 when folks on Reddit discovered the actual song and artist, link. * edit. Adding more links for context, *. Link.
El Dorado or the Lost City of Gold turned out to be a mistranslation. It was just the name of some guy that got mistranslated to the name of a city.
Sounds like exactly what someone who is on the trail would say.
In the 1970s, a number of Japanese citizens disappeared from coastal areas in Japan. After many years it was found out that North Korea had abducted them. North Korean abductions of Japanese citizens, link. Edit. Megumi Yokota, link. Most of the missing were in their 20s. The youngest, Megumi Yokota, was 13 when she disappeared in November 1977, from the Japanese west coast city of Niigata.
In case anyone is interested, also go look up that time Kim Jong-il kidnapped a South Korean director and his actress wife, as well as the SFX team behind Godzilla in order to make his own monster movie.
The Andreen MacDonald case. She and her husband Andre, yes, Andreen and Andre, originally were from Jamaica. They moved up to my town in Texas where Andre was Air Force and Andreen was a bodybuilding business owner. Andre was pretty jealous that Andreen was more successful and was constantly begging, demanding that she make him co-owner of her company. She always said no. One day he had it, and did away with her. The gym that she frequented, every single morning, got concerned when she stopped showing up. She was very close with the ladies that she worked out with, and even gave them a key to her house. She told them that if she ever went missing, that her husband probably did it, and they knew he had an attitude. So one day while André was out, the ladies went to check on Andrine. Her car was there, her wallet was there, but she wasn't. They found blood and hair in her bathroom. That's when cops were called. Cops showed up when André was home and asked about Andrine. He said she was in the hospital. They asked him, if she's in the hospital, how come her wallet's here? He responded simply, talk to my lawyer. They got a warrant and were able to search the house further. Saw more leftover evidence in the bathroom, and evidence of clothes had been found burned in the fire pit in the backyard. But no body. So all they could do was charge him with a missing persons deal. André was super snarky about it too. How he'd be proven innocent. How the cops would never catch on. Little did he realize how loved Andrine was. And how much Texas ranchers hate corrupt and snarky individuals. Crowds gathered daily and were given permission to sweep over ranchers' land for any sign of Andrine's body. Just as crowds started feeling defeated, and André started to see hope of being released, a rancher was scoping his field. He had heard coyotes out and went to see what could have enticed them. Sure enough, he found human bones, later identified as Andrine. So yeah, proper charges were able to be filed. **add-on***. So some ask why she stayed or why he felt jealous that she was more successful. Remember, they're from Jamaica. The whole point of coming here was to better themselves, and bring pride to their families. So she was doing great, but because she was doing so good, his family was kind of looking down on him because his wife was better, more successful than him. And then she stayed with him, mainly because she wanted to try and make sure their daughter's life could be as normal as possible. Sucks that kind of backfired for her, but now she's being taken care of by her aunt and grandma who both love and support her.
Apparently he killed her in front of their autistic non-speaking 6-year-old daughter. The guy is pure evil.
Not so much a mystery, but Fermat's last theorem, link.
Maths postgrad here. This is a real interesting one. The proof is long. Real long. At best, or worst he. Undergrad proofs may be 5 to 6 pages long. Now I specialize in applied maths, so perhaps it's double or triple that in postgrad pure maths. Wiles' proof is well over 100 pages long. It draws upon many areas of pure maths to the point where even actual maths academics may not understand every topic involved in the proof. Well, can't be any worse than the proof being left as an exercise to the reader. Edit. The history of the proof is amazing. I encourage everyone to briefly read the Wikipedia article. Link. *** second edit. *** seems to be of interest to people. There are some relatively accessible results in mathematics that have actually stumped people for years and remained unsolved. But, in the spirit of this question, there are many statements that have been solved. Here are a few. *** the four-color theorem. *** link. *** Euclid's infinite prime proof. *** link. *** fundamental theorem of arithmetic. *** link. For the brave reader, who wants something nasty, I give you *** Gödel's incompleteness theorems. *** link. Maths is great, but not omnipotent and omniscient. No matter what framework you work in, there are always results out of your reach. Third edit. Punctuation and grammar. *** fourth edit. *** ACCT4 non-hive opinions has quite rightly disputed my claim on people rejecting the validity of Wiles' proof. My source comes from Dr. Kevin Buzzard of Imperial College London and a talk he gave. Link. Page 11 of this PDF. I will amend, because of this, some people reject the proof, to something more accurate. I'm glad I have been held to a good standard, so thanks to you, ACCT4 non-hive opinions, for calling me out on my Saturday laziness. Fifth edit. Turns out I just use big words to make myself sound more photosynthesis. You, ACCT4 non-hive opinions, has shown my misunderstanding of the topic. I have yet to encounter someone who does not agree with Wiles' proof.
Where is the Titanic? Most people don't realize that half of the people in the world grew up when the ship's location was still a complete mystery. Now, it's old news.
Where is MH370?
Link. This one is strange. A guy is out drinking with friends late at night and leaves. He starts wandering the streets, and a CCTV sees him enter a cul-de-sac, then he's never seen again. Some think there is foul play, since an accidental death would at least result in a body. But then family and friends reveal that he had a very strange habit of sleeping in garbage bins when he was drunk. A few hours after he entered the cul-de-sac, the garbage truck came and picked up the bins. Later, after looking at the logs, it turns out that one bin weighed several hundred pounds more than it should have. But that was only recognized after it was too late.
What's the purpose of the appendix really? It keeps your good bacteria safe.
Dumbass appendix tried to kill me.
Gidus and the Land of Tar. A few years ago, 2017, comedian Nate Fernell posted a tweet of an enamel pin he had bought of a familiar-looking friendly monster with the word Gidus written under it. He was unable to find any information on what Gidus is, and the mystery took the internet by storm. The mystery kept growing as someone found a sticker of Gidus alongside other characters all listed as the Land of Tar. The sticker sheet was from a company called Denison. There were no Google results at all for either Gidus or the Land of Tar. With multiple people researching, that was where the mystery was left off and people kind of forgot about it. But a couple years later it was solved. A podcast was made where they investigated the mystery, got a hold of the former art director of Denison back in the 80s who referred him to a few potential artists, and they found the daughter of one of the artists who had passed away, and in her father's stuff was the original pencil drawings of the creatures of the Land of Tar. It was never anything but those stickers. This internet mystery still appeared on lists for a while as unsolved. The only mystery left is who made the enamel pins, which is still a mystery but not quite as big as, who is this character and this land that seems familiar but that there's no record of.
That was a fun mystery. A nice change from the usual ghoulish stuff.
I have one that most people seem to not know about. Grand Duchess Anastasia was in fact killed with the rest of her family in 1918. She never escaped, and the several women throughout the 20th century claiming to be her lied. The site of the execution of the Tsar and his family was completely untouched until 1991. Excavation found only 9 of the 11 expected remains. It wasn't until 2007 that 2 further sets of remains were found a small distance away from the previous gravesite. DNA testing found that one of the sets of remains belonged to Tsarevich Alexei and the other to one of his sisters. With this find, it proved conclusively that the entire imperial family was in fact executed and buried in 1918.
Not a lot of PPL know, but Anastasia's remains were confirmed because Prince Philip provided DNA. He was a grandnephew of the Tsarina Alexandra.
The Golden State Killer, East Area Rapist, Joseph James D'Angelo. A former police officer, who was sacked for burglary, and mechanic. American serial rapist, murderer, burglar. Committed at least 13 murders, 50 RPS and over 100 burglaries between 1973 to 1986. I was listening to the 6-part podcast called Casefile, and they hadn't yet caught the suspect. But a year or so ago they finally got him after collecting DNA evidence when he put a tissue in the bin outside. It was a confirmed match. **** edited to add as I just did a brief summary. Although it's been covered in the comments by me and a few others, I'll add here for clarification. He was caught a few days over 3 years ago. Time flies. He was only a cop for a short time before getting sacked. He was found shoplifting at store for supplies, like a hammer, dog repellent, at that time, and not robbing a house. He left semen as evidence. Because he wasn't uploaded into the database or caught beforehand, there was no DNA match in the system. The way they got onto him as a suspect before gathering hard evidence of the tissue, was a familiar match uploaded onto GENMATCH by what was a 3 to 4th cousin of his. The officers in charge of case then went through 1,000 DNA profiles from his tree to finally narrow it down to him. They then swooped in to gather the tissue to get 100% clarity before the arrest. He was living with his daughter and 15-year-old granddaughter at the time of his arrest and was acting perfectly healthy and very fit for his age. When presenting to court, he was in a wheelchair and pretending to be senile. Such an act. He is also described by all his victims as having a very small penis. Unusually small. At crime scenes he would pretend to talk to someone else. Go to the kitchen and make himself food or drink. leave beer bottles at the site and go back to raping. He would break in and prepare the home before coming back a few days later to RP. By doing this he would leave little objects, like guns or rope cut at certain lengths, and steal items. By then he would know the layout of the house. He would shine a torch in people's eyes to blind them. He'd often cry apologizing to his mummy or saying he wants his mummy. Other times he was cussing a woman named Bonnie. Before breaking in and raping he would stalk and call the phone line several times. He would then call the victims after the RP and breathe heavily into the phone and/or whisper. There is audio of one of these calls. It's quite disturbing. He also went back to RPA victim. If you haven't already, listen to the podcast Casefile True Crime. You can find this on Spotify. I highly recommend it. The narrator is a Aussie who does an incredible job and his voice is lovely and very easy to listen to. He gets right into the story and doesn't mess about. Look for the episode number 53. It's a 5-part case with the following 2 bonus interviews. And an update before Casefile episode 83. It's also been mentioned the HBO series I'll Be Gone in the Dark is a must-watch and about Joseph. And a book titled I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. The phone call I'm talking about is at 2-minute mark, link.
He was a real piece of work. Before raping the wife, he'd tie up the husband and put some plates on his back, and tell him if he hears the plates crash then he will kill the guy's wife. So basically the husband has to lie there motionless while hearing his wife getting RPD by that piece of poo. Edit. Another thing that happened was, there was a town meeting about the attacks where everyone tried to make sense of it. One guy declared that the husbands were cowards and if the rapist broke into his house then he would give him a piece of his mind. That guy's house was targeted next and the guy suffered the same fate.
It's disgusting. He also RP'd a few women whilst their child, Ren, were lying in bed next to her sad face. I believe he tied up one of the little boys and placed him on the floor before proceeding to RP the mother. And because she was protecting her baby child, she would have to do as told. What a piece of poo. That doesn't even cover it. Just pure evil.
The Pioneer gravity anomaly. Space probe wasn't accelerating away from Earth the way we'd predicted, but it didn't get noticed until the probe got way the F out there. Next space probe gets launched, gets way out there, same thing happens. WTF? How does acceleration not work right? Does gravity just change really far away? Turns out the heat from the radioactive death generator was all coming off the same side of the space probe, and the extra particle radiation gave a thermal recoil force, resulting in an extra acceleration of, no kidding, about 0.00000000874 meters per square second. Over enough distance, it all counts.
Greater than the radioactive death generator. The what now?
The prophet hen of Leeds. A hen was laying eggs with messages like Christ is coming, and people thought the world was ending. Turned out the farmer was actually writing on the eggs herself, and then reinserted it back into the chicken. Edited for gender of the farmer.
Greater than reinserted it back into the chicken. tar_tar.
In 1981, a Soviet submarine ran aground in Swedish waters. This was a huge deal, although the Soviets claimed the sub was in distress and didn't purposefully enter Swedish waters. Basically everyone in Sweden saw it as evidence that their waters were being invaded by spy subs. Plus, they did some snooping of their own and determined that the sub was emitting radiation, meaning it had nukes on board. So they went along with the Soviets' clearly false claim about an accident and helped get the sub out of there, but panic was in the air. So the Swedes did exactly what you'd expect, and they prepared for more Soviet subs. I mean, when you see one Soviet sub, surely there are more, right? So Sweden developed advanced acoustic technology to detect subs, and they created a plan to basically seal off their waters when they heard a sub. And wouldn't you know it, a year later, they found a Soviet sub. Well, they didn't find it, but they absolutely heard it. And they cut off the bay and figured they just had to hunt the sub down. But after a month, they couldn't find it. They gave up and reopened the bay, but they assumed the sub found a way out. But they'll get it next time. And then it happened again, but they couldn't find it again. And then again and again with no clear pattern for a decade. What the heck? Thankfully, the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed. So, No more subs, right? Niet. Because the Russian subs were still coming. Wait, what? Okay, so now nothing is making sense. At this point, the Swedish military brought in outside experts to figure out what was happening. This included oceanographer types who were obvious experts in the surrounding waters. The military then played the audio evidence of the Soviet submarines, only to be told they weren't submarines at all. They were fish, and the propeller-like sound was water being released from their swim bladders. And that's the story of how the Swedish military spent 10 years and tens of millions of dollars chasing fish farts.
When I was in the Finnish conscript army, I was taught how to identify a sub from fish and seals. It was mind-numbingly boring to listen to basically white noise for hours when you were on watch. We all dreamed of catching a sub just for a bit of excitement.
Sarah Yarborough was a teenager a few doors down who watched over us on several occasions when we were young kids. She was murdered and dumped in a bush at the high school like a piece of trash, and it was absolutely devastating. It wasn't a small town, but when it happens to your neighbor, it is very much in your sphere of awareness. Everyone was scared. I remember the media circus at the home, the eventual tapering off of said circus, and the family moving away to get away from the undoubtedly bad memories and constant reminders their kid was murdered and the killer was still out there and on the loose. It turned into a cold case. Every now and then, I looked for news of an update even though I grew up and moved away. I did this for years, decades even, because it always bothered me as an early childhood memory. A couple years ago, I finally saw a local news report that DNA evidence and genealogy databases led to the arrest of the murderer. For me, that was an emotional moment of getting closure, and I can't imagine the magnitude of emotions and fresh wounds felt by the parents having learned that nearly 30 years later, the investigation on the cold case paid off. Link.
Mary Toft. I mean, really, what the F? TLDR. NSFW. Woman starts giving birth to copious amounts of rabbit parts. Woman taken to London and studied under intense supervision. Turns out she was shoving the pieces up there days before for the publicity.
I've never heard this one before. Was anyone actually surprised? I have a feeling that would be the #1 prediction of any scientists planning to observe her.
Human spontaneous combustion, not a real thing. It's where there was an overlooked source of ignition, then subcutaneous fat is absorbed into clothing and acts like a wick. Basically they're a human candle. Edit. You might find this interesting. Link.
I remember a lot of OG Unsolved Mysteries episodes about spontaneous combustion. I thought it was a real concern as a kid.
The tomb of Jesus' previously unknown brother turned out to be a hoax to try to sell the tomb of a nobody for a lot of money.
Bermuda Triangle, Devil's Sea. A triangle-shaped section of ocean where airplanes and boats were known to disappear. Apparently most stories were embellished, and there is so much traffic that goes through the area it's actually a very small amount of vessels that go missing, percentage-wise.
And a whole ton of stuff said to have gone missing in the triangle weren't a million miles near it when they vanished.
Molyneux's problem. If a man born blind can feel the differences between shapes such as spheres and cubes, could he, if given the ability to see, distinguish those objects by sight alone, in reference to the tactile schemata he already possessed? The answer is no.
The Marfa Mystery Lights. Small town in West Texas has lights that can be seen dancing off the horizon in a certain spot some nights. For many years the source of the light was not known and explanations ranged from mass hysteria to the ever-popular UFO. One researcher finally figured it out. The elevation changes and desert air would occasionally combine to distort and project headlights from cars on a highway several miles away. Reports of the mystery lights from times prior to the highway or automobiles are probably campfires in the general area of the highway. Like many highways, the area was already used as a road for quite a long time.
The story of the Toynbee tiles always fascinated me. In the 1980s, all these tiles started to appear in major cities across the U.S., mostly around Philadelphia. They were laid in the ground, in the middle of the streets, and no one knew how they appeared there. They had strange messages. Toynbee idea in Kubrick's 2001 Resurrect Dead on Planet Jupiter. There's an amazing documentary about this guy who noticed the tiles and went on a quest to figure out how they were appearing and who was creating them. The tiles are actually in the asphalt, which is not an easy feat. In the doc, Justin Dewar finds the guy and figures out how he does it with a car that has no passenger seat and a hole in the bottom. It's a beautifully heartbreaking story and I highly recommend watching it.
I've become skeptical when police solve a serial killing. They are often under a lot of pressure to find the killer. They sometimes blame a bunch of killings on one guy. Had a documentary on Netflix, brain fart, can't recall the name of it, of a guy in Texas that confessed to the murder of a girl he was dating. She was wearing red panties and the cops started calling it the Red Panty Killer. He confessed and then they asked him if he killed anyone else and he said, lots. Word got around and the sheriff and Texas Rangers would tell other agencies to bring the case file, strawberry milkshake and pack of Lucky Cigs and the guy would talk. He confessed to a lot of killings. Someone got curious and did a map of all the killings and when turned out it was physically impossible for him to be in all those places at the time of the killings. Sheriff and Rangers had a simple trick. They would give the guy the milkshake and cigs and tell the investigators from other states to give the guy a little time and then interview him. But, they would leave the case file in the room with him all alone and he would read the case file. They come in and ask questions and he knows all about it. Case solved. In the end it turned out his DNA was not on the panties of the girl he first confessed to killing but some other guy's DNA is, but the sheriff, cops, rangers consider all the cases to be closed.
Henry Lee Lucas. There is so much more to that story too. The Rangers ended up involved. Multiple officers lost their jobs. It started an entire investigation into the departments and the way police work was done. Funny thing is, the lawyer who brought all this out is a household name in Central Texas as one of those lawyers you always hear commercials for. Had no idea all he had been involved with, until about 5 years ago. Guy was a beast for justice. They had to put him in protective custody to keep him safe from Leos trying to kill him and his fans for all the corruption he uncovered. Edit. For those interested, the attorney was Vic Feasel.
Rex McElroy. Over a good few years he was an absolute piece of poo. Lived in Skidmore, Missouri. Groomer, rapist, married this 14-year-old girl who he gave Stockholm Syndrome to avoid RP charges, piece of poo lawyer to get him out of literal attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, etc. It was well known that he also stole cattle or something like that, but because of the pooty law system they couldn't do anything about it without direct proof. Oh, did I forget to mention that he had kids with this 14-year-old? One of his crappy kids tried to steal some candy from a store in 1980-ish. The store owner who was 70 caught this kid, so Rex started stalking the family who owned the store, coming to their house and just standing in front, making threats and all. In a confrontation he tried to blow the owner's head off. Ernest Bowenkamp, the owner, dodged and had his neck grazed and he was quite hurt, but alive. Finally he was caught for this and found guilty of attempted murder, but bailed because he was rich. People would literally leave whenever he entered a bar. He bullied a sheriff into stepping down from his job, and was constantly loaded with money, buying new trucks all the time. Well, eventually people got tired of this poo. Dozens of people followed him into the bar. McElroy finished his drink, went back out. As he started the car, an unknown amount of people opened fire on the bastard, absolutely destroying him. As a matter of fact, they wanted him dead so bad they found revolver casings on the ground, meaning someone had enough time to reload an entire revolver. There were numerous shooters, and the Stockholmed wife called out one shooter, but every other person there, around 50 people, said that they saw nothing, and hell, some even said they heard nothing. So yeah, bastard was dead after near a damn decade of ruining this little town. Investigation was concluded with nobody charged, no proper testification, nobody sentenced. But we all know it were the townsfolk, and McElroy deserved it.
The identity of Deep Throat, the Watergate whistleblower that eventually led to Nixon resigning, not the P.U. pervs. His identity was secret for 31 years, until 2005 when he was identified as Mark Felt, an FBI AD, who had come down with dementia when it was revealed, not by him. Hey. Link.
The Death Valley Germans. Link. There is a very comprehensive report, detailing years of investigation.
I came here looking for this, and was going to post it if no one had. What a tragic story. I really feel for that family and what they went through. It had to be so utterly hopeless after a while. Also, major kudos to Tom Marhood, who essentially, out of the goodness of his heart, tracked them down on his own. What an exceptional person. I'm sure it brought their family some kind of closure. Chupacabra has been pretty much explained by a guy who investigated it for 5 years and wrote a book called Tracking the Chupacabra. Long story short, the initial eyewitness thought the movie Species was a documentary. Most subsequent sightings, bodies were wild animals that looked weird because they had mange.
Roman concrete that resisted seawater, and the missing Roanoke colony. The lost recipe for the concrete turned out to be something we misinterpreted, and the Roanoke colony was abandoned because the settlers decided to live and mix with the natives. DNA tracing was able to connect this.
Greater than the lost recipe for the concrete turned out to be something we misinterpreted. Didn't they use volcanic ash, or was that the misinterpretation?
I read something a few years back stating that in attempts to make the cement for concrete, we used regular water, when the Romans used seawater. It was that change that we missed. If I can find that article, I'll link it. It's also plausible that theory also changed since I read that, given it was years ago.
The Romanovs. On the 20th of July 1918, Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children were executed by the Bolsheviks in the basement of a house on Ekaterinburg. No one knew where they were buried, and over the years various people came forward claiming they were Princess Anastasia or Tsarevich Nicholas and that they'd survived the execution. In 1979, the family's remains were located. But they only found 5 bodies. Had 2 of the children managed to survive after all? Nope. In July 2007, the remains of the other 2 children were found by an amateur archaeologist not far from the first burial site. Fun fact. The late Duke of Edinburgh assisted in the identification through DNA, as both he and the Romanov children were descended from the same daughter of Queen Victoria. Link.
The mystery of Beth Doe. In 1976, 3 bags were found on the bank of a river in Pennsylvania. They contained the mutilated remains of a young woman who was pregnant in her 9th month. Investigators suspected that she was immigrant from Yugoslavia or some place in Central Europe. Theories went around about being an honor crime, killed by baby's daddy, or fell in the hand of a serial killer. The case was solved by DNA few months ago, and she was a Puerto Rican teenager named Evelyn Colon who was murdered by her boyfriend, who in turn was apprehended. Edit. So, I guess many people here held on to the fact that I misspelled her nationality from Puerto Rican to Puerto Rican. Some here are right that my native language isn't English, it's Arabic. I do hear it the movies pronounced with po instead of pwe. As for how they mistaken Puerto Rican for Yugoslavian, they did so by using isotope analysis, which, as a technology, needs more work as it proven to be false many times.
Do you mean Puerto Rican?
Once lost my bank card the day I got it. 5 years later, upon moving out, I found it stuck to the bottom of a lamp.
Damn, did the lamp end up making any charges?
The Boogeyman. Albert Fish was an American serial killer who was also called the Boogeyman, and is thought to have popularized the term. This is the man your parents warned you about at night. He was a child rapist, cannibal, and murderer. While he committed several disgusting, disturbing, and depraved acts, the one that got him caught was the murder of a 10-year-old little girl named Grace Budd. He responded to an ad for work her brother put in the paper, but when he met the family, he changed his mind from killing him to killing Grace. After he killed and ate her, he then wrote a letter to Grace's mother, explaining in detail what he did to her daughter. This letter was thankfully his undoing, as it provided the key to his capture. The police were able to trace it back to its source and arrest him. This letter has been made public, and if you are interested, you can read the full thing by searching Letter to the Mother of Grace Budd by Albert Fish. Below is a quote from that letter detailing what he did to Grace. I can't even imagine being a mother and reading this. I am so glad that they caught him, and he was taken off the streets. Who knows how many more people he would have killed. *** warning. Graphic. ***. On Sunday, June the 3/1928, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street, brought you pot cheese, strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her, on the pretense of taking her to a party. You said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wild flowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I did not I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run downstairs. I grabbed her and she said she would tell her mama. First I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not F her, though, I could have had I wished. She died a virgin. Quote. Video. If you want to know more about this story, here is a video you can watch that goes into more detail. Link.
That was a rather unsettling read. How the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids. A French architect figured it out. They used an internal ramp system. Some of the turn stations for the ramps are still there. Really quite brilliant. The solution does not disappoint.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.